Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoy these episodes, help support this podcast by becoming a Patreon. Sign up at www.patreon.com/brew-and-ink. Your support will help our team to continue to produce great content like this. Also, check out our syndication page, SeriousWriter.com. Do you want to be a series writer? At SeriousWriter.com, you'll find videos, topics, classes, resources, and a podcast, the Brew and Ink Podcast. We thank you for being a faithful listener, and now, on with the show. Hello and welcome everyone back to another Brew and Ink podcast. We are excited to be here with you guys tonight. We've got a special guest. This is an Interbrew episode. We've got MB Mooney with us.
What's up?
We've got myself, SM Freehand, and we've got Carla Hoch.
Thank you for saying it. You pronounced it correctly.
I know.
Yes, check. And she is with, she's an author with her own book, Fight Right, which is a brilliant piece of work. She does a great job of helping authors teach them how to appropriately or just better, in a better way, produce their fight scenes or even envision how their characters would be as a fighter or how they would maybe address things like combat or maybe not. So we are happy to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Anything to do with fight scenes, action, and violence. And the name of the book, Fight Right, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes. Not realistic, not authentic, believable. And I think we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to tell the difference.
That's awesome. And just so people know, and we've had her on the podcast before, my first introduction to Carla was in Reno, where you took a good friend of yours and beat him up for an hour late one night. and
yes, it was wonderful.
It was so entertaining. And it's just one of those things that Carla does such a great job. And my daughter came to Realm Makers this past summer, and I gave my daughter a couple kind of, not pointers, I just kind of steered her a little bit of a few classes besides the teen track that she could maybe take or be interested in. And she took your first class, and she just took every one of yours, and she was like, she's the best.
Thank you.
And I was in there with one of them where you had the whale, and like something happened and the whale exploded because it was on the bloated whale on the beach. Yes. And you were like, oh, I'm sorry. I should have warned you all about, it's just so cool. It's so fun. So
it's a GIF. I don't know if you say GIF or GIF, but it's GIF of this. It's like a marine biologist, and they have this beach sperm whale, and it's bloated, and he walks up to it and just barely cuts it, and the sucker just explodes. And I was talking about the sensory experience. That's what writers want. They want that moment. Yeah. And you definitely get it from that GIF.
So we're going to be talking about a movie today, and it's a movie that Steve and I have been wanting to do a review on and talk about, and we've even thought about trying to do the whole series, but just trying to wrap our brains around it.
Oh, you could. Absolutely, you could.
Yeah. And then, when we were talking with Carla at Realm Makers, and she's like, look, I want to be on the podcast again. Let's do it. And I'm like, absolutely. You're the star. Let's do it. And I know that Carla is a big fan of John Wick, as we are. And so I said, well, why don't we do like a combination writing fight scene sort of focus on this one movie and kind of use it as a real life example of some of the things that you teach and talk about. And then we can also just talk about the movie because we're fans. And so, so for me, John Wick was a rental. I don't know if that's for everybody, but I think for me, it was a rental. And I was just looking for a dumb action movie one night, and I rented it, and maybe from Redbox, and I rented it. And I just fell in love with that movie. I think like a lot of people, I had basic expectations. I just wanted it to be a cool action movie.
Right.
And I was just blown away by how awesome it was. And that they took this really simple idea and did it so well. And I think it really revolutionized Keanu Reeves's career again. I mean, I think this movie kind of gave him a little bit of a shot in the arm because he's had an amazing career. And he's such an amazing guy from everything that I can see and read about him. So something that we just kind of want to maybe hit on real fast is that, Carla, you have some kind of personal connection to some of the people in the film.
Yeah, I am also a correspondent for Black Belt Magazine Jiu-Jitsu, and I had the awesome pleasure of interviewing Rigan Machado, who is a legend in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, and he was the trainer for Keanu Reeves for John Wick. He was also for Chadwick Boseman and Scarlett Johansson, and I believe the subsequent movies as well. And so he and I talked about it a little bit, and him training Keanu, and Keanu Reeves is like the action version of Bill Murray, and that you can't say anything bad about him. There's nothing. He is beloved by everybody. Anybody who doesn't like Keanu Reeves, I'm automatically suspicious of, because I mean, even if you don't like his acting, that's aside. What negative thing have you ever heard about that precious man? Right. So, they did a great job of picking him for a whole lot of reasons. And I think that's one, especially my generation. Love him.
Well, anytime Bill and Ted, shoots everybody, that's such a great mashup. Yeah. I think that one of the things I loved about it, and we can just kind of do a general thing, is like just how simple it was. It was just a very simple movie, but it's a great example to me of doing a simple story as a writer and executing it well. Like I don't think a lot of writers realize, and I think even the movie industry in general doesn't realize, as we were talking about earlier, the value of just basic execution. Real Steel is a good another example.
The hero's journey, basic things.
The hero's journey, or just if you're going to do something, just do it well. Just find people who do it well,
right? And
put your all into it, because Keanu Reeves could have phoned this in, right? And we would have never heard of this movie. He could have phoned this.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It would have made. He
could have gotten a stunt double for every single bit of it, right?
But what did he do?
And he did as much as insurance would allow. He did it himself. And something people don't realize is when you are training an actor for something like this, they have to be mindful of not getting beat up and not getting bruised. And that's something that I asked Rigan Machado about. I was like, how do you train these people without their face getting beat up? Because easily, he could have gotten his nose broken, in one scene. And you're like, well, crud, now we got to take a break before we film, X and X and X. Yeah. So, people sometimes say, well, that celebrity didn't even do that. Well, you don't take into account, number one, their insurance company may have not have let them, but also it may have completely disrupted the production of the rest of the movie because of injuries they could have sustained. But something else that John Wick does really, really well is it is a good story. Within the first 10 minutes, he has our heart.
Yep. Yeah.
Because we know he hurts, and darn it, a puppy comes into play. Mm-hmm. So people who cannot identify with true love, they can at least, it's a dog. It's a sweet little puppy dog. And something else I noticed. Okay, so in the first movie, he has a dog in all three movies. In the first movie, it's a beagle. And in the other movies, it's the most stunning pit bull I have ever seen. That pit bull, lifts weights. The most stunning pit bull I have ever seen. Okay, well, here's what I started thinking about. A beagle is a hunting dog. That's why it has long ears, to drag through the scent so it can help find things. And that's what he did in that first movie. He hunted the people down that took something from him. Okay, fast forward to the other movies. He's not hunting anymore. He's latching on and he's destroying. And I love pit bulls. Pit bulls are not evil creatures. I love them. But their face is constructed the way it is because they're supposed to latch on to something. Yep. And they will not let go until they're ready to let go. And I kind of like, I don't know, that's something I just thought was kind of cool. Nobody said, hey, that's why they did it, but that's just something I picked up on. But I love the movies, and I suggest them to people all the time for realistic reference. And here is the difference in the name of my book, Believable Fight Scenes. Okay, people say, I want an authentic fight scene. No, you don't. No, you don't. You do not want an authentic fight scene. It's like, I want authentic Thai food. That's all I want. No, you don't. You want Americanized Thai food, because authentic Thai food will turn your rear end into a blowtorch. Okay, that's how it works. So the difference in authentic is a real person. What we want is a beautiful wax figure from Madame Tussauds. Okay, that's what we want. Believable. Those are believable looking things. Because if it's an absolutely authentic fight scene, it may be over in 10 seconds.
Right. It's going to be ugly.
Or it's going to be ugly. It's not going to, suit the purpose of your work. There's probably not going to be much dialogue. That's something I'm asked about a lot, is dialogue and fight scenes. And I refer to action movies a lot because, first of all, action movies are the number one money-making genre at the box office. People go to action movies and we become so engrossed with them. You are actually factual. You can look this up in Weight Watchers, I think. You are more likely to eat more during an action movie than any other type of movie. And it's because we become so completely engrossed with it. And you know what? They're not authentic. There's not really someone you call Thor. There's no Infinity Stone. Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? There's no Infinity Stone. And I've never seen anybody stand up in the middle of Star Wars and go, this couldn't happen, and walk out. No.
Right.
That's what we're there to see. We're there to see what's believable. Not
engaging.
That's what's engaging, not what's authentic. Okay. If we wanted real life, we would just sit at home. But in real life, when you kill somebody, they may evacuate their bowels right there on the spot. In real life, when you're in a fight with somebody, they may vomit all over you. On TV, when they do CPR and the person comes to, how many times have you seen them vomit? I don't know if I've ever seen it. How many times have you ever seen them get their ribs cracked by the person doing the compressions?
Yeah, because they teach that's going to happen.
Yes, I used to. I was a teacher and I was the designated CPR person on the hallway. And I had a guard that I could put over my face to guard myself from the vomit when I did CPR. And so that's the difference in, I try to think, I think of it as, Asian food. Do you really want authentic Asian food? Because you may pay for it later. Or you just want really good Asian food that you want to come back for, because that stuff is hot.
And that's what John Wick was too.
Exactly. Well, and there are some things they absolutely do right that are more authentic. Even though it's more believable than authentic, there are some things that are 100% authentic.
Well, I will say that I actually do want authentic Asian food sometimes, because I did live in Korea for 4 years. So sometimes
my husband did too. Yeah.
So sometimes I do know but I have been in those restaurants where they're like, how hot do you want this? And I'm like, make it you hot. Make it you.
Right.
American hot. Do you want it American hot?
I don't want American hot. I want authentic hot. And they always give me this look. I'm like, I'm serious. I know what I'm asking.
Yeah.
But no. So what would be some examples of, from John Wick, of a scene or something where it was a believable fight scene? And what were the elements that made it entertaining and believable? Because I think that really was the thing that set this movie apart. Was, yes, it was a good story, although I think there was one plot hole that we can get to at one point, but it was a good story, and it was an engaging story, and we cared, and it made us, the movie made us care enough about the main character that we were engaged and we're in. But the fight scenes, I think, are what sort of took it over the top for people.
Yeah.
And so
they did such a good job in creating that world. They created an entire world where you have these, judicial committees, and there's this special type of currency that makes you indebted to somebody. It was so, in some ways, it was almost urban fantasy, because there was a world within a world. And the only thing that keeps it from being urban fantasy is that world within the world was a real world.
Yeah. There's still using flip phones and like old technology.
Exactly. But something that I liked, that I say is believable, maybe not authentic, has to do with the gun work. Now, he was 100% trained tactical gun work.
Yes.
And what I loved about it is he reloaded his gun.
Yes.
Imagine that. He reloaded his gun, or he did, I think it's called a New York reload, where you don't reload, you just grab another gun.
Right. Yes.
You know,
so he was very bullet conservative, but bullet conscious too.
Correct. He didn't just stand and just start spraying, say hello to my little friend. He never did that. And he was conservative, as much as he could be. Right. Now, the part of it that kind of strains credulity is how little he was shot.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that, and I think it was in the first movie too. I get the movies mixed up sometimes, but I think from the very beginning, he had a tactical suit that kind of had a Kevlar built in.
That was more in the second movie, I think.
That was more in the second movie. Okay, yeah, well, let you know. All right, in the second movie, he has kind of Kevlar built in. Yeah, it may stop the bullet from piercing you, but it doesn't stop it from breaking your rib in 100 different ways.
Right.
So, but the knife work, see that? I don't even know if that's in the first movie. I think that's more in the second and third movie.
No, there was a really good knife scene at the end of the first fight in his home, where he's going back and forth with the guy, and it was like the last guy he has to take out.
Yeah.
See, he's very aware of where the knife is and how he's positioning himself. And this it's actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because this goes back to something you said in one of your classes, where when you're in a knife fight, no matter how good you are or how well you're trained, you're gonna get cut.
Everybody gets cut.
Everybody gets cut.
Mm-hmm. And that's the case with him. And the blocks he does are fantastic. And not once do we see John Wick do some hocus pocus fancy disarm like you see, in the internet. Oh, you just, hit the hands like this. Right. And I've been taught the maneuver where you hit the hands and the gun and the knife or gun goes flying.
It'll work maybe 40%. Maybe in a practice situation.
In a practice situation. Yes, in a practice situation. And he doesn't do that. He addresses the threat. For the most part, he does it conservatively. He doesn't do a bunch of crazy stabs. He goes immediately for the major strike points, the major arteries. And he was trained in Filipino martial arts, if I'm not mistaken. That's where his knife work comes from. He was trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His judo is lovely. He has beautiful judo. So, you see him doing all of those things. And as much as he as an actor was able to do insurance wise, he did. Now, where it gets to be a little unbelievable is, you had a guy fall off a balcony in the disco. Boy, a lot of stuff happens in discos in these movies. That'll teach you. That'll teach you, young kids. Don't go to discos.
Don't go to discos.
It's dangerous.
Stay home. The discos are dangerous. But it's brilliant, too. What a brilliant place to plan an attack, because it is crowded. There are crazy lights. There is a lot of loud noises already there that can cover you. But a guy falls off the balcony, hits the floor, and he kind of turns over and he keeps shooting. And I'm just like, I don't know about that.
You'd be out of your breath for a little bit.
I think you'd be out of your breath, and also I think you'd hit your head. I mean, I take that. In judo, the very first thing you are taught is how to fall. And it is relentless, the number of ways you learn to fall, forward, backward, sideways, because that's everything is keeping you safe. And so in judo, let's say that the guy who fell from the balcony was trained in judo, because he did kind of wrap his arm around himself the way you're supposed to. You don't put your arm out flat. You do learn to pick your head up. But falling from that height, I don't care how much you pick your head up, I would think hit the floor would make your head go down. And that was my main thing. But let's say his head didn't even hit. Yeah, you're going to be out of breath. You're going to have some major ouchies.
Yeah.
And, but he still, he turned over and kept shooting. And even though that was not authentic, it could be believable. You never know. I mean, look at the real things that happened in Lone Survivor. This is a true account where one of the special forces guys had a portion of his head shot off, brain literally exposed. The whites of his eyes had turned black because of the blood. He was talking. Not only was he talking, he was having he was doing a coherent back and forth with people, and he was shooting. Now, okay, that is a person who is very high on adrenaline. that is someone who also has impeccable training. I think that's also a situation where God just intervened and gave him a little bit more time. But that's not the normal. But that's a case of where is it authentic? Believable? Yes. Authentic? Not so much. And you also can't get hit by a car a bunch of times and keep going a bunch of times.
Yeah, that's my plot. So my one criticism of John Wick is these guys are all out to kill him, and they figure out like, okay, we made a mistake, we pissed off the devil. Basically,
Baba Yaga,
which is my plot hole for the other movies. Like, now that you know he's the devil, just stop messing with him. Anyway, but there would not be any more movies if they were that smart, right? But my point is that in the original movie, he gets hit by a car and they just don't kill him. Like, they've been trying to shoot him and kill him and shoot him and kill him and shoot him and kill him, and then he gets hit by a car and now he's tied up.
Yeah.
And now they're going to talk with him. And I'm like, okay, stop.
You got to have the main villain monologue.
Out. But I think you mentioned something in one of your classes about this with John Wick. Like, if your character is going to be the kind of character that can get injured and keep moving, it's got to at least be consistent. Like, that's got to be the rule of your world, like the rule of your world.
Yes.
And it is consistent. That's my point. It's consistent through 3 movies. The dude literally falls off in the third movie. Spoiler alert, everybody. In the third movie, he gets pushed off of the high, whatever, on the top of the building and hits a couple things on the way down. And
oh my gosh,
he's still alive somehow.
Yeah.
And the dog is still with him. But that's consistent.
Oh my gosh, the dogs. Yeah. Yeah, the German Shepherds, the stuff they do in that third movie.
That third movie, yes.
Oh my God.
The choreography with those dogs.
They keep upping the ante every
they
time.
do.
They have exceeded expectations because, usually the first movie, it's first blush. You're like, oh, this is the best one. And then you see the second one, you're like, oh my gosh, that's the best one. And then they have the third one. I'm like, holy cow, how can this keep going? Because they introduce that underground world. And that's the world, you keep learning about. And you learn in that third movie why he understood the Russian in the very beginning. And my roommate from college, when she got married, they adopted 2 little girls from Russia. And so I learned a little rudimentary Russian to kind of speak to them, like Mama said, eat right now. Where is it? What is it? Who is it? I know a little rhyme about asking a goose if it would like to go to lunch with you. And
okay, what? Can we hear that one?
All I remember is goosey yitskatitya, something da da da. Yeah, and I learned to count and basic things like that. And I know what the Baba Yaga is, and this is, I've heard people say, the Baba Yaga is the devil. And somebody said, well, I know what it is. It's the boogeyman. I'm like, well, yeah, it is kind of the boogeyman. But according to these girls where they lived, the Baba Yaga was like an old witch woman that lived in the woods, and her house was propped up on chicken feet.
Chicken legs. Yep.
Chicken legs. Thank you. And so it's this ominous creature woman, that's out there that is a threat to you, but only if you go out into the woods after her. And I like that concept better because, realistically, John Wick's a murderer. He is. Let's just be realistic. He killed people that he should not have killed. But, the police seem to know what he does, and they're like, yeah, you do your thing.
The only smart people in the movies.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. But John Wick, it wasn't until they released the Kraken that the Baba Yaga came after them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he was, that poor man is not looking for a fight. God bless him. He's just trying to live a quiet life with a dog somewhere. And people just keep pulling him back in.
No, but I think that's part of the good writing. Part of the good writing is we see he's had this violent past, this dark past, and that love has saved him. I mean, it's a trope, right? But at the same time, for guys, bringing a dog in, and I know for everybody loves dogs, but bringing a dog in again makes him this, vulnerable character that we like and lovable,
vulnerable, lovable.
And he's always fighting against his nature. So his nature is to kill. Like he doesn't have a problem with this. Like he's actually pretty good at it, and he knows he is. But that's the tension throughout these movies is that he wishes he could have peace, but he keeps getting sucked back in. And I think you're right. Another part of the good writing that I don't think we realized until we saw the second and third movie, that they didn't really have to put in that sort of extensive world building. And they didn't do a lot of it.
I love it.
But they didn't have to do that much in the first movie. But since they did, that gave them so much more to explore in sequels. And I don't know how much they did it on purpose or not. But anyway, the fact that they did it gave them a foundation enough to be able to really explore that.
Right. And as the movies progress, you find out that why he understands Russian, and you find out that I don't want to give too much away, that his roots come from an area that is war torn. And so this man, his whole life, either by heritage or by job or just by virtue of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, violence finds this guy, and it's constantly finding this guy. And something that I talked about with Higan Machado, you and I, we all talked about a bit before the show. Part of the great thing about it is the director. The director was at one time a stuntman. Yeah. And so when you're looking through the lens of something like that from the standpoint of somebody who's had to do those stunts, you're going to have a different understanding of it. You know, you bring something to the table. Yeah. Me as a fighter, I can bring something to the table that maybe somebody who doesn't know how to fight can't bring to the table. So I think that was a part of the success too, because you have a director that knows what best camera angle is, and he knows what works and what doesn't. He knows, no, if you go falling down the steps like this, we're not going to be able to get this lighting and all that. So all the way around, it was a perfect storm for success. Yeah, it really was.
I was just going to say, and I think also the fact that Keanu Reeves went through such extensive training, it shows in the way those action scenes play out. And even from the first fight scene in his house to the one that was, in the bathhouse and all that, like he keeps his form. He's very we can talk about, gun technique versus CQB, close quarter combat or close quarter battle. Keeps his gun close up. He's got both eyes open. He's not squinting down the barrel or anything. He's looking for his shots before he takes them. And that's all comes from him drilling and drilling and drilling and being taught by people that are professionals that know what they're doing.
Yes.
And know
tactical training, you can tell.
Yeah. And know how to tell him, oh, no, this isn't the right way to do that. His footwork, that's what makes these things much more engaging, because as a viewer, you're not having to call out like, oh, that, that's not how that would work. Or you're more compelled to go, whoa, did you see that? Right. Grab that guy's arm, swept the leg, move the gun, and then double tap.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, that's judo. It's also sambo. Sambo is a Russian martial art, which is kind of like catch wrestling, where you can also, hit the legs and everything. And they go into, you actually see a scene of sambo in the third movie. And so really and truly, as those movies go along, they're not just new violent stories. With every movie, you're learning a little bit more about him, as a person, and you're learning a little bit more about this world that they've created that is just crazy brilliant. I love when movies set in modern day do not include smartphones.
Right.
It just makes it too easy. It makes it too easy when it is. I love that. And there's this whole underground switchboard, that is an old school switchboard that has pads that they sign off on and stamp on. So, it was, again, it's kind of urban fantasy. It is. In a whole lot of ways. But yes, if you are looking to write fight scenes, those are great movies to give you an idea of what to look for as far as technique and the foot sweeps and the throws and all that he does. I just urge people to not write that much. Obviously, you can get away with that in an action movie because you can physically see it in front of you. But when you have to read it, when you're looking at it, even though you don't recognize Boom, that's sambo. I know that. Boom, that's a judo throw. That's a seiyonagi. You know, you know all those things. But even if you don't, there's a compelling storyline. Well, that doesn't translate to writing sometimes. If you include all of that in writing, you risk losing a reader who doesn't know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, judo, sambo, Filipino martial arts, tactical training. You know, so I think those are great movies for you to understand blocking and how the body moves, but just don't include as much as they include in an action movie. And they're really good with dialogue too. The John Wick movies, there's not a ton of dialogue.
Nope.
During the fight scenes. Now, there may be a few places here and there where he and Cassian kind of talk a little bit, but it's not that's the second movie, right?
Yeah,
that's the second movie.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not unrealistic. And they don't have this whole Scooby-Doo moment where they kind of reveal everything and everything is kind of laid out for everybody in this very unrealistic manner.
Yeah.
You know, they also understand strike points brilliantly. Okay. Now I'm hopping ahead to movie 2. Sorry, folks.
You're good.
I mean, there is a point where someone, I'm not going to tell you who, someone is stabbed. Okay. And John Wick leaves the knife in them. And the reason is, as long as that knife is sitting there, that person has a little bit of time. But if he pulls that knife out, he's going to bleed out immediately.
So
that's a thing.
Let's bring it back to movie 1. And I don't know if you remember this, but I had this in my notes. I was like, I want Carla to react to this. He's having that fight scene at the end with Vigo. And he basically takes the knife. He gets stabbed so that he can break his arm. And then he goes and pulls the knife out of himself. I'm like, no, don't pull the knife out. What are you doing?
Yeah, but where was it?
It was in the gut. It was like right under the ribs, looked like.
Okay, but here's the thing. Was it in the center or was it off to the side?
I guess it was off to the side a little.
That's
so if it didn't puncture a lung, then
That's the difference. Now, it could puncture the intestines, which, you know, make you septic and all that kind of stuff. The difference is you move it over to the middle and you have an abdominal aorta. There's no coming back from that. There's just not. And so the little things like that, you know, it's even the person even had, whoever was in charge of that, even had a working knowledge. Well, you know what? That's the difference in being trained by someone who knows what they're doing. And I did some Filipino martial arts for about a year. And when we did knife work, all of the strike patterns are based not only on vital targets, such as, you know, blood-rich areas, but it's also based on bodily response. If I want to go for your throat, and this will relate to what we're saying, if I want to go for your throat, but you've got your head down and you're guarding your throat, I'm going to go for your stomach. Because when someone goes for your stomach, if you're not thinking, if you're not trained, you lean forward and you go like that. Well, now what do I have? You know, and whoever did that stab, they understood that, you know, the gut shot, you can get septic. If it's too wide, you are going to have some intestine that comes out. But where it was and the width of it, it's believable.
Okay.
So that's the difference in somebody who's actually done the art. And I'll tell you something else you don't hear, thank heavens, is clicking of the knives.
Right.
No, that's not how that works. You don't block like that, you know, and they do that. So yeah, it's so realistic. You can tell that whoever was behind that actually had done those moves before.
Well, again, and I don't know how much money they spent on the most recent Snake Eyes movie. I should have looked this up. But you know, I just got done watching the Snake Eyes origin movie, G.I. Joe, and I am such a huge G.I. Joe fan. I am a huge G.I. Joe nerd, had all the original comics and Snake Eyes and everything. And if there's any movie that should have had amazingly choreographed fight scenes, it was that movie. But Snake Eyes did the herky-jerky camera stuff where you didn't see anything. And I'm like, no, that's what happens when you don't want people to see that you don't have a well choreographed fight scene. And again, some of the things that John Wick did so well is they had other characters refer to him as an expert, right? See, this is an important thing. This is a writing trick or whatever. If you have other people refer to you or your character as an amazing martial artist or swordsman, or whatever, then you can bring a lot of that in without having to go into flashbacks or having to go into training or going so that's kind of what they did is the son made the dumb move and that's believable. The son, he's an idiot and we all know kids and then they're an idiot and he didn't know better. And that's my problem with the other movies is those people did know better. Let's leave the guy alone.
Yes, they did.
Anyway, so, but again, if they left the guy alone, we don't have two other amazing movies. But the point is that that makes it believable. And that's another thing. It's all about execution. It really doesn't take a whole lot to execute well. You just have to think about it and then commit to the things that are important. And that's what frustrated me about the Snake Eyes movie is I was like, all of a sudden this dude, he's an amazing ninja and he's been trained for a week. And, there's all those
Cobra Kai effect. That's what I'm officially calling it from now on. The Cobra Kai effect. These kids go to, karate for like 2 weeks and they're all walking around with black belts.
Yeah. Able to take on multiple opponents at once. And
when you have a movie like G.I. Joe that, the Snake Eyes movie that has the military aspect to it, there are so many stinking resources out there for those people, for people to train them. Now, the difference comes in, and I asked Master Machado about this. I said, well, how long do you have to train the person? And he goes, it depends on the movie budget. He goes, if you have, and I never even thought about this, part of that budget goes toward training that actor for a certain amount of time.
Right.
He said, with a big budget thing like John Wick, with the Black Widow and Black Panther, they have a budget that will allow those people to get trained. He goes, I have had people give me 1 day.
Wow.
1 day. And that's it. And so I think also when you have people that you can train so well, I think your blocking is going to be better. Because when you know how to throw that punch, you understand where your body's going to be oriented and you understand how that other body is going to react to it. Part of the reasons why fighters do combos in their punching. And when I talk kickboxing, I'd always say that, one punch is a snack. A combo is a meal. And you want to make sure that your opponent has a full belly. So, the first punch, I call it the jab. The forward hand is called a jab. And then the backhand, whichever, if you're right or left hand dominant, is the cross. And the jab is the hello. The cross is the goodbye. And the jab sets the body up. So, combos move the body around. So when you are fighting, and it's like this in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the hardest person I sparred with a kid, which I make a concerted effort to not spar with anybody who could borderline be my grandchild. But this kid, he was like 18, which kind of hits the border where he couldn't be my grandkid. So he passed that. But he was a brand new, like he'd only been doing 2 weeks. And the most dangerous person on the mat isn't the black belt. It's the new person because they don't have control of their body yet. They don't understand how to they don't have restraint. And I had the hardest time with him. And I realized it's because my game is based on how he should respond. And he doesn't know how to respond. So since I've done this move, normally I would say, well, this will set up this and this will set up that. Well, it's not going to set it up if the person doesn't know how to respond appropriately. So it's one of those things like you dance better with a good dancer. Mm-hmm. So when you know how to fight, and that is why I teach tactical classes at writers' workshops. And I explain to people, by tactical class, if anybody's never been to my class, I teach you how to punch. I teach you how to do judo throws. I teach you how to hold a knife, how to, I go over briefly how to hold a gun. And by the way, it's not like this. It's funny. It's funny that this is our gun right here with our thumb. And really it's more shaped like that. But anyway, it's not sideways and it's not out in front of you. And I tell people, I said, I am not teaching you this so that you will write these specific things. I am teaching you things because you need to understand how the body is oriented while it is doing this task. You know, you need to understand how the body will be pushed if you are punched. You know, if you're punched on your right side, you're not going to fall on your right side.
Right.
You're going to fall on your left side. And that's just physics. That's just how it is. And I do talk about bodily responses when it comes to, you know, being stabbed. And, you know, so I the more an actor is trained, I think the more solid the fight scene is going to be, for the simple fact that the actor themselves, they understand the physics of it. And I think that is one of the beauties. I know for a fact, Keanu Reeves just didn't show up and practice a couple times. No. I have seen pictures of him in a jiu-jitsu gi sweating like crazy, you know, and he's a white belt. He's a white belt. He makes no, you know, and something else I was really impressed about, I asked Megan about, I was like, how in the world do you take an actor who has gone from knowing nothing to, you know, portraying proficiency? And he said, well, it has to do with the actor. You know, it also has to do with the camera angles, and it has to do with the stuntman. When you have somebody like Keanu Reeves who is 100% committed, right, you're going to get a brilliant scene. And he said, that's not how it is with all actors. He said, some actors come in and they're absolute jerks. They know everything. They're not going to listen to anything, you know, and that's when you have the fight scenes that sometimes don't work out so well.
Yeah. Humility goes a long way in martial arts.
That's the whole thing. You know, you have to, I also, I read a lot of nonfiction, and I'm reading a book called Limitless by Jim Quick. And he talks a lot about how the brain works and about learning. And he talks about efficient learning. You know, he said in schools, we're taught what to learn, but we're not taught how to learn. And he said one of the roadblocks of learning is trying to assimilate what you know already to what you're learning. He said, when you're learning something, think of nothing else but what you're learning. Don't try to think, oh, I know that, I know that. He goes, approach it all as if it's all brand new.
That's good.
And I think Keanu Reeves, he's the type of person that does that. I mean, he's the type of person that takes the subway. You know, he'll take selfies with you. So, humility does go a long way, and knowing how to learn, being honest until you can. And I've seen this. We've had a little chunk of guys join the gym recently, and I can already tell who's going to do great and who's going to struggle. And the ones that are going to struggle is the one like, oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, I get that. Oh yeah, I get that. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't get that. You know, and I can understand that they may have a hard time learning from, you know, a woman who's the size of a strapping 5th grade boy who is pushing 50. And if that's the case, guess what? You're going to struggle, you know, versus the 17 or 18-year-old kid that's like, hey, can you teach me this? Thank you. Hey, can you teach me that? Absolutely. Yeah. So it's also the attitude you walk in with. And, you know, Keanu Reeves, he has that attitude, you know, and he kind of has that attitude in the movie. He doesn't come in. What was it? Albert Einstein said, it's when you're a genius or when you're intelligent, you don't have to tell anybody you are. And he's one of those people that, you know, when John Wick walks in the room, he doesn't go around telling everybody he's dangerous. There are every martial art has a personality. And I have experience in about 10 different fighting styles at this point. And there are some martial arts that if they have a black belt, they're going to put it in the conversation in some way. You can be talking about, you know, I just got a combo at McDonald's. Me too. And I dropped ketchup on my black belt. You know, they're going to put in. And then there are other martial arts that you don't know how dangerous that person is. You know, and John Wick, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo are two that those people, they're not telling you how tough they are. Right. They let everything speak. And that's very much, he walks into the room and he is he follows the rule, be polite and a plan to kill everybody in the room.
That's great. Yeah. And it's true. They say people that understand violence, that know violence, are less likely to try and seek it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I had a hard time explaining this to people. obviously you're going to have jerks in every profession. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, over the past probably year and a half, there's been a horribly sad uptick where women are coming forward and they have been, abused or assaulted some way by their coach. And it's a martial art that has humans in it. So not every single one is good. A black belt does not make you a good person.
Right.
However, what I have found time and time again is people who have fought, fighters as a whole, they are calm, kind people because they understand pain. Not all of them, of course. Like I said, you're going to have jerks. Jerks are going to find a way. They're human. But I think there is an unspoken respect for humanity when you have traded blood or traded sweat with someone. There really is.
Yeah.
And that's why they do tend to not understand. And this is something else too. People assume that I'm a violent person. I'm one of the least violent people you'll ever meet. And they're like, well, if you're my mom, oh my gosh, my mom's like, could you beat him up? Could you beat him up? And I'm like, I would not beat that person up. She was like, well, if you were attacked in the parking lot, could you? And I'm like, I would run. And I actually heard a special forces guy on a podcast talking about it. He was like, yeah, if a guy in a bar is trying to take me on, guess what? I'm going to walk away. Right. Because I know what can happen. I know firsthand. And so, firsthand, I'm going to walk away. And if you'll notice, God bless John Wick, he tries his best to walk away.
Yeah.
He doesn't walk away when they don't leave him alone.
So I think that's a great segue. We talked with you about earlier, right before we got on, about you trying to lift up this bigger dude that's one of your trainers.
Yeah.
And I really like the scene where he's in the hotel and he gets jumped by Miss Perkins.
Yes.
And he does his best to not kill her. Like he
really does.
Goes through that whole fight and then even put someone in charge of her. He's like, hey, can you watch her and take care of her? Right. I'll make it worth your time. But I wanted to get kind of your perspective as being, a smaller female who is trained and has to, grapple and go to the ground with people that are bigger than you a lot of times. What did you think of that fight scene from the first John Wick against Miss Perkins and John?
Well, I mean, it's fantastic. And also it works. Okay. The reason that I am able to ever submit any man. Okay. And this isn't about, feminism or equal rights or anything. Look, this is biology. Men, pound for pound, they have 33% more strength pound for pound than a woman. So a man my same size, my exact same size, is going to be stronger than me. That doesn't make me less of a human being. Right. Okay. That just means I need to go to a different tactic. And I have always said that training with men will make you tough and training with women will make you deadly. Because you can't necessarily use your strength with a woman. And we have learned that our strength isn't going to match theirs. So you know what? We're going to have to be tactical. We're going to have to be really technical. But the only way I am ever able to submit a man in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for the most part, is because we're agreeing to do Jiu-Jitsu. If at any point they decided to punch me, I got a problem. If at any point they decided to just go nuts and use all the testosterone in their body at once, I got a problem. And that scene works because John Wick is holding himself back. He could have made short work of her in nothing flat. But this is something else too. You can tell the people he has respect for. Right. Even if he does not agree with them, he respects the way they're going about things. And he respected the fact that she's doing her job. This is what she was hired to do. Isn't that right? She was $2 million. Okay. Yeah. She was paid $2 million. And so he doesn't take it personally. And it's like in jiu-jitsu, when somebody submits me, I don't take it personally. It's jiu-jitsu. It's not about me. Writers, when somebody turns down your work, it's not about you. It's the work. The work didn't work in that moment. And so he respected that she was just doing her job. And he respected the way that she went about it. She was very matter of fact, kind of like, you know how this goes. Yep. And he could have dispatched her immediately. But I think there was a professional respect, just like he has with Cassie.
Yeah.
there were many times he could have walked up behind Cassian and shot him in the back. We saw those. A matter of fact, in the second movie, he tries to walk by Cassian kind of like this, hoping that Cassian doesn't see him. Not because he can't kill him, but because he respects him as a professional. Dude, let's just go by each other and not tangle up. And so I respected that fight scene in a lot of ways because, John Wick could have made quick work of her. She was not getting away with the things she was getting away with for the simple fact that she was well trained. Although, my gosh, she was amazingly well trained. Yeah. Part of the reason why the fight went on as long as it did is because John was holding back to a certain extent, not only as a professional, but as a man. And if you're a woman listening to this and you walk off upset because I've said that, I question whether or not you're actually a fighter. Right. Ooh, I said it. Yes, I said it.
Boom.
Boom. I said it. I mean, there's a reason. Like right now, there was a problem one time in MMA. I won't name the fighter. That they had a transgender fighter, and it was, it's always the man going to the woman's athletics, but you don't see the women go into the men's athletics, right. And there is a reason for that. And there was a problem with that transgender man for the simple fact, again, he may have been taking hormones at the time that lowered his testosterone, but the fact was he had grown up his whole life with that testosterone. And it did. Yeah. It makes a difference. Am I saying men are better fighters than women? No. I'm just saying pound for pound, they're stronger.
And the important part of that story, too, is that the people he was fighting against, or she was fighting against, didn't know that he had been a male beforehand. So there is something like, if a woman wants to go in and have a bout against a man or a bout against a transgender person, knowing full well what they're up against, that's different.
Right.
But that has been a big issue recently nowadays, like records just being blown out of the water. Because of differences in athletic abilities.
Yeah.
Biological.
You know what? It is. There you go. Biological potential. It's not about technique. It's not about my ability to choke this person or something. It's we're walking in the arena and they're at an inherent advantage. Again, that 18-year-old boy that I was sparring with, he had done jiu-jitsu 2 weeks. I've done it almost 7 years. Okay. I would hope I'd know a titsy bit more than him. But it was tough to deal with because he was coming at me with teenage boy strength.
Right.
And but now he was an athlete. And I know this is something that unless you have, done some fighting, especially on the ground, it's a concept people don't understand. And it's knowing where your body is in space. And I haven't even have a hard time explaining it to people, but I can tell when I'm sparring with somebody if they were an athlete growing up. Now, sometimes it doesn't translate. They could have been a great basketball player their whole life, and then they're a total spazoid once they start doing jiu-jitsu. But you have an understanding of how your body is oriented related to the other person. So, how to keep your self in or tuck or protect it up. Well, T-Rex arms. Like a T-Rex.
Well, there's just a certain level of, like you're saying, body awareness. You're more aware footwork and balance. And there's, I mean, if you've been an athlete, even in a non-fighting sort of way, if you've been an athlete, you get balance. You get, well, what do I do when I trip? What do I do when I fall? What do I do when I mean, you have some of that. It may not be fighting level, but you have some of that thing. Right. And some of it might need to get broken. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. Like you might have to relearn some of that.
Right. Maybe. You do. Now our coach, our gym is, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it has a very American style. Some people kind of wince when I say American Jiu-Jitsu, but you see it a lot in the no-gi tournaments. No-gi tournaments is where they're wearing like the compression gear versus the gi with the belt. And it involves a lot of wrestling. Now, the concept in wrestling is you want to pin somebody. All right. You want to be on top. You don't want to be on your back. That's why it depends on the style of wrestling, but wrestlers will arch up so that their back doesn't touch the ground. And, you can have somebody that is a Division I wrestler, and our coach's brother is a Division I wrestler. And his first day on the mat in jiu-jitsu, yeah, he was coming in at a pretty huge advantage. Okay. But then, he gets put flat on his back and they kind of across the board, they freeze for a moment. Yeah, they're out of their element. Now, are they going to learn quickly? Heck yeah, they're going to learn quickly. That's in their wheelhouse. But it kind of is a different mindset. Yeah.
So we talked earlier about writing fight scenes and something that I had to learn, I think, as I was writing, and I think I do them well, but people have commented on my fight scenes and I always try to have a story in the fight. It's like the fight when I'm writing it has to be a story. Like you were saying, you don't want a real, genuine, authentic fight scene because those are usually over and they're not really very exciting, and whatever. Like you don't want that, but you do want believable ones, and dialogue and all that stuff kind of comes into it. So, what are some of the elements that maybe we haven't talked about yet that you see in John Wick? Where, they had a scene, and I think the one in the hotel room with the woman is a great example. I think the one with Cassian in the second movie, although again, like you're saying, longer than we want it to be in a narrative form, but that was its own story. I mean, that 10 minutes or how much ever that fight scene was between the two of them. So what are some of those elements from John Wick that writers could look at and say, if I want to make a fight scene work, these are some of the elements I can kind of take away from John Wick and good fight scenes that I see.
Yeah. Something that I really like with John Wick, and it's a phrase that my judo coach always stressed. It's you want maximum efficiency with minimal effort. And that's how you want to write as a whole. I think it was Mark Twain said, whenever you find an adjective, kill it. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I think your fight scene needs to be concise and it needs to have a point. I say this in my book, and it's so funny. It's been a couple years. It takes about a year for a book from finished product to the shelf in the traditional publishing world. And so when it finally hits the shelf, you've stepped away from the work for a while. So every now and then something will come out from my book and I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, wait, I said that. But I said that somebody brought up that if killing a character is just a segue to another scene, then I think you've kind of devalued the life of all the characters. And so I think there has to be a reason for that fight. And in every single fight scene in John Wick, there was a reason for it. It wasn't like, a slasher movie where, matter of fact, the John Wick movies could be much bloodier than they were, and they weren't. Especially the knife fighting scenes. Now, yes, you do see. Especially, I remember, I think the third one, lots of people shot in the head, lots of people. But again, you see the spray behind them. You don't see the whole back of their head come flying off.
Right.
You don't. And that's a thing that happens. So when you're writing a fight scene, I think you really want to get it down to the bare bones of it. And you don't see John Wick doing flashy moves. Not once. You do not see him doing crazy back flips. And, he gets to the point. He grabs you and he throws you and he stabs you. And again, it's not these crazy slashes, booms to the neck and he moves on. And I think that is the difference in a trained fighter and somebody who likes to look like they fight. A trained fighter is going to go in and get the job done as quickly as possible, because the longer you are in the altercation, the more the likelihood of you getting hurt. So you want to make it quick. So don't belabor your fight scene. I tell people start with just 3 moves, just 3. And people say, well, I have a lot of moves. And I'm like, that's okay. When as it goes on, maybe you can go back and include those moves, but 3 moves and only what you would see in a comic book panel or a graphic novel, because comic books are fantastic about making it, even though it's 2D, they make it a very sensory experience. You see the expression on the face. You see the sweat, you see the blood, you have a call out bubble, sometimes you'll even see like steam. So you have the idea that there's a smell, and they make it a very sensory experience. And that is what we as writers have to do, because not everybody can relate to being shot. Thank heavens.
Right.
I cannot relate to being shot. Now, I know people who have been shot that, I've been able to interview and talk to them and they can tell me what it feels like, but I don't know what that feels like. However, my friend who was, I had a coach actually who was shot in the leg, and he said this was perfect. He has such a writer's heart, this guy. When you meet a natural writer and they start talking, you're just like, oh my gosh, they're such a good writer. They are so much better than me, and they have never written a word ever. He said it was like somebody took a bat to my legs and just swept his legs right out from underneath him. Okay, that's beautiful because that people can relate to. Mm-hmm. Have I ever had a bat to my leg? No. But we know the weight of a bat. We know how to swing a bat. We have a concept of the amount of force that we can create with a bat. So something that doesn't translate with the John Wick movies is that you don't have to understand how to fight in order to appreciate those movies. You really don't.
Right.
But on a page, if you go at it with a lot of technical lingo, if you go at it with a lot of fancy moves, then you are going to take your reader out of the moment because they're going to be so much trying to figure out, wait a minute, where am I? What's happening? Yeah. That's something I really love about the book Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk. I say this every time I mention his name because I've mentioned his name before, and then people have gone off and read some of his short stories and gotten back to me and said, why did you make me read him? I'm not making you read him. He is a gritty writer. He is the type of writer, when you read his work, you're just like, oh, I love that. I love that when I read, I forget what is one of his short stories. It's terrible. It's about the boy in the pool, if you know what I'm talking about. Oh, but after I read that short story, I'm like, I need to wash my hands. I need to wash something. I just feel terrible. But he describes in Fight Club, actually, there's not a lot of fight scenes in Fight Club in the book. I mean, it's called Fight Club, but if you've seen the movie, read the book, it's not about fighting. That's just kind of the backdrop. But he mentions in one place that the guy holds his head like a football. Brilliant. Brilliant. Because people who know nothing about fighting, they can understand that. They're like, oh, okay, he's got it, he's got it gripped like this. Yeah. But if you do understand fighting, you understand a whole other level to that, and that the body is behind.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're not going to be holding the head like a football because your arm wouldn't be able to do that. So keep it simple. Keep it simple. Our readers are smart. Let them fill in the gaps. In a comic book, when you have a scene, and it may be like a battle scene in the comic book, they're not going to show you everything that's happening on the battlefield. You don't have to. The reader's imagination can fill that in. Your reader is smart. So just highlight the big moves. Just start with 3. You can go back and add more if you want, but just start with 3. And I actually did a blog post. Oh yeah. If you don't know me, I have a blog, Fight Right, FIGHTWRITE.net. Go to that website, hit read the blog, go to the index. And I actually have kind of a mapping thing. If you're a visual person and you're just sort of getting lost in your fight scene, I show you kind of how to draw it out, not with stick figures, but it's like, okay, this is the move I want. Okay, well, what would the physical response be? Right. Okay, does that work? Is that what I'm going for? If I want my character to punch in response, then I can't have them fall face down because then they'd only be punching the floor. So, little things like that. So, but the more simple you keep it, make it a sensory experience. We have seen fights on TV. We watch sporting events on TV. My gosh, watch Hamilton on TV. We get a better view from our couch than the people in the audience. The people on stage, we have a better view than the actors, the athletes. We have a better view than the cameraman because the cameraman can only see from one angle. Right. On the couch, we get to head hop and see it from a lot. So, if you have such a great perspective on a couch, why the heck does anybody ever go to anything live? Because it's a different experience. It's a very sensory experience. I love going to fight because what you miss on the couch is the environment. It's you're plunged into a whole different sensory experience. You smell the room, you feel things, you can there's different things that you hear that you can't hear on the couch. And I think that's what we want our readers to do. We want to take them off the couch and we want to put them in the arena. So when if you're looking at John Wick as kind of reference, don't look at it as somebody sitting on the couch. Look at it as somebody who's on his couch. In that very first fight scene where the people come in his house, which he does a really good job of using his house to his advantage. He knows where to hide. He knows where the improvised weaponry would be. Improvised weaponry is anything. If you pick up a rock and hit somebody with it, Cain and Abel, improvised weaponry right there. But stand in the middle of the room and watch that fight scene. What are you going to see? What are you going to hear? What are you going to smell? Yeah, you smell things in a fight. Fights have a smell. That's just, you can smell gunpowder. Blood has a smell. Now, if one person is stabbed, the whole room isn't going to fill up with the smell of it unless you're in a tiny enclosed area and there's a lot of blood, then you might. But make it a sensory experience. That is one of the things we love about John Wick. It's more than just punch, hit the floor. It's all the backstory tied into it and the sounds and the expressions on people's faces. And, we're in it with him. We are invested. And I don't think you can get a reader invested on technique alone. I think we get invested on things that we can relate to. And human beings, no matter what language you speak, no matter what culture you come from, there are a few this is cool to me. There's a few facial expressions that everyone has. No matter what their culture. When people are happy, they smile. Yeah. That's just what they do. When they're disgusted, they wince. When they're angry. Now, the subtleties and other things, it may be different culture to culture, but people can relate to pain. And, things happen in John Wick. And the very first movie, I went with actually a bunch of people from my jiu-jitsu gym. And we all went together and we all sat together. And you had people who were black belts in jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, that's like kickboxing, and judo and Filipino martial arts. And it wasn't just us that was reacting. It was everybody in the room. And you can't tell me that everybody in that room had the same amount of expertise as the people that I was with. But when things happen, people go, oh, that's what we want from our reader. And it's not the punch itself that makes people go, oh, it's when it lands. It's not about just throwing the punch.
Yeah.
It's how it lands, because that's the thing that we can relate to. So I think I've said way too much here, but keep it simple. Keep it simple. 3 moves. Remember what bodily reactions are. But if you remember nothing else, make it a sensory experience. Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you say, but they will not forget how you made them feel.
Yes,
and I think we can walk away from a book sometimes and we can forget the story, but we can remember whether we liked it or not. Because we have feeling attached to it. So that's what you really want to connect with the reader. Make it a very much sensory experience.
Well, and the opposite is true as well. I mean, like you said, you can have a very technical fighting scene, but if there's no emotional engagement or resolution, then you might go, oh, well, that was a cool little move, but then again, you're not going to feel like, oh, I love that movie. You're just going to get to the end of it and go, oh, they had some cool moves, and then you're just going to kind of move on. But it's those movies where we get invested, and books where we get invested in the characters, we get invested in the story, the story goals, the goals of the character. We're invested in John Wick's goal. He just wants to be left alone. Just leave me alone. I just want my dog back, or you killed my dog. I'm going, we get invested in the goals, as simple as they are. And again, like I said, it's what I've been learning is that it is about a great story, and we should have a great story, all those elements, but it's really more about execution than it is anything. Because like I said,
play on words there.
We could have, I really do think, Keanu Reeves had some training for the Matrix movies. Why didn't he just phone it in? Why didn't he say, oh no, I got all that. But no, he spent a whole other, how many months, 6 months or whatever craziness he did for John Wick. And it shows. So we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, but let people know, you already talked about your blog, let people know your social, and
Okay.
website and stuff where people can get the book and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. The book is Fight Right, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes with Writer's Digest Books. The Kindle version, I believe, is with Penguin Random House. You can get it anywhere. Sure, you can get it on Amazon, but there's a lot of other bookstores in the world other than Amazon, I promise.
Preach.
You can also go to, fightright.net, FIGHTWRITE. But you know what? If you misspell it and do RIGHT, you'll still get to the same place.
Smart.
And there's a kind of a one-stop shop. I also teach with Writer's Digest University. I have one class in their library now. I'm hoping to add at least 2 more this fall, and they're recorded so that you can take them at your leisure. And there's also notes that you can print out with it. Social media and I have a rocky relationship. I hate it.
It's complicated.
I like the media part. It's the social part. Yeah. It's complicated. It knows what it did. Okay. She knows what she did. Okay. Again, it's the media I like, the social part, not so much. But I do a lot on Instagram and Carla, CARLA.C.Hoch, HOCH, or you can follow hashtag Fight Right. And once a week, I will post like a Fight Right tip. Usually I do it Tuesdays, Fight Right Tip Tuesday. And one of the last posts I did is how when you get shot, the bullet's only part of your problem. Another part of the problem is the energy that puts the bullet in your body. And I have pictures of ballistics gel showing you what is going on inside your body when a bullet goes into you. I have another post that just talks about, fight words, different synonyms for fighting. Sometimes I will do links to just different blog posts, or every now and then I'll do an open call for a question and I'll answer it on IGTV. I need to do that. I haven't done that like in 2 months. So I need to get back on that. Facebook, not so much. Facebook, if you're a writer, Facebook isn't friendly to writers. It's just really not. So if you want to stay on Facebook, I use Facebook for messaging and to stay with different writing groups, but mainly it is with the gram. I am also on YouTube and I have not added. Okay, let's just all take a breath. Okay, I know that I need to put more videos out there. I've had to prune and just try to get, my priorities in order. I have certain things I have to do for Writer's Digest and all that on a regular basis. So I am with you. I do stuff on YouTube. I have a Fight Right channel. So there's a lot of different opportunities out there for you to learn about how to write your fight scene. Nobody expects you to know how to fight. It is a foreign language. If si camino en el cuarto y estoy hablando en español, if I walk into the room and I start speaking Spanish, people are not going to understand me. And they don't feel bad about it. Why? Because nobody ever taught you Spanish. You're not expected that. And it's the same thing with fighting. You're not expected to, it's literally an art form. So first of all, don't feel bad if you don't know how to fight. It's a learned thing. Okay. Yeah. You don't feel bad for not knowing how to build a house, do you? No, nobody ever taught you. So same thing. You do not have to know how to fight to write a fantastic fight scene. Chuck Palahniuk is not a trained fighter. And his fight, Tolkien was not a trained fighter. Orson Scott Card, not trained fighters. Now, Louis L'Amour actually was a boxer. But for the most part, you don't have to know how. And those are examples of they did not rely on technique as much as they did the experience of it. So there's a lot of resources out there. Do not get overwhelmed. On my blog, I have a lot of different ways for you to break down a fight scene. I get overwhelmed. I have attention issues, and I tend to look at a big thing and think, "Ooh, that's too big. I can't do it." So I have to break it down into small pieces. And that's what I do with fight scenes. And yes, I have written fight scenes. I have written fiction before. Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of resources out there. I promise. Also, send me messages. If anybody out there has sent me a message, go ahead and preach. I respond. And I will help you out. I do mentoring appointments if I have time. And just reach out to me through the instant grammar or on my contact form on the blog.
Nice.
Yeah, you got a great Instagram page. You do a good amount of stuff on there. So if you guys are interested, go check out her Instagram, check out her blog. she's got a wealth of information out there for people that want to know more about fighting and martial arts and want to know more about being a good writer.
I think I am a prime example that you don't have to be any particular thing. Like normally if you look at all the different training I have and you want to attach it to a person, I guarantee they would attach it to one of you before they would attach it to me. You know, right. I mean, just on looks alone, I don't look like somebody who knows how to do much of anything except cart her kids around. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a beautiful thing. But anybody can do this. Now, can anybody do it well? No, but you can do it weller. I'm going to make that a word. Weller. You can get better. I was also a track coach at one time. And I used to tell the kids, look, guys, not everybody's going to be fast, but everybody can be faster.
Yep.
And when it comes to fight scenes, you're going to have to practice it. It's like anything, just do it. Write a couple fight scenes that you're just going to toss just to give yourself some practice. But above all, if you walk in it thinking, I can't do this, this is going to be terrible, guess what? You're right. A lot of it's your attitude. So go into it positive, go out and look at all the resources out there and reach out to me anytime. Keep an eye on my blog and Instagram because I do teach quite a bit, year round. And I also have some, classes in the Writer's Digest library.
Always a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us. And
Thank you.
We could probably talk for hours more about fighting and movies and writing. So thank you again for joining us today. And we hope you listeners that you got something out of this, that you learned something, you got inspiration, or maybe just a new place to go and learn some more about this type of writing, or maybe a good book or a movie to watch. But as we like to say, raise a glass to inspiration and stay inspired, guys.